forcing like memes or trying to do things that are just not like authentic don't typically work. We work with a ton of brands that were like, we just want to go viral. We want a meme, create a meme for us. And it's like, that's not how the internet culture works, right?
Hey there, James here, and you're listening to the Own the Moment podcast, the show where we explore the complex and always evolving landscape of marketing, advertising, and branding, and try to get to the bottom of what it means to be a truly memorable brand. The Own the Moment podcast is brought to you by Como Technologies, a self-service, complete customer engagement platform that helps you cut through the noise to truly connect with your customers and retain and grow those connections over time. With Como, you can build and deploy new campaigns, activations, promotions, and programs in days, not months, and our software is used by some of the world's biggest consumer brands, from Heineken to Budget, Goodman Fielder, Foxtel, JLL, Williams Racing, and McDonald's. Learn more at como.tech. This week, we're talking to Melissa Rosenthal, one of the most innovative and accomplished marketing leaders going around. That's a big claim, but I think Melissa's resume and track record support the claim. Melissa is currently the Chief Creative Officer at ClickUp, the 7th fastest growing company in America. ClickUp is an innovative workplace productivity platform, and they're currently valued at $4 billion and have raised money from the industry's top venture capital firms, including Andreesen Horowitz and Lightspeed. ClickUp is a B2B company that does brand, creative, and marketing that feels like a B2C brand. And a lot of that is up to Melissa. I do urge you to go and check out the ClickUp YouTube channel. Prior to ClickUp, Melissa was part of the founding team at Cheddar, a fresh and internet-native take on financial news, which sold to one of the biggest cable companies for $200 million. Before that, Melissa led creative at Buzzfeed for over 6 years, managing a team of 100 plus creatives, and was involved in building out the branded content product, helping oversee over 3,000 campaigns from Fortune 500 companies, resulting in almost 300 billion views. All of that is to say, Melissa knows a thing or two about making great content and stories for the internet. We had a great discussion touching on how or how not to go viral on the internet, how brands can tell better stories, and what the rise of generative AI means for creatives. Let's get to the show. Melissa Rosenthal, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. So I want to start with BuzzFeed, I'm curious as to how you reflect on your time at BuzzFeed now that it's in the rearview mirror. It's not a company without controversy. Some believe it's responsible for the rise of clickbait culture, while others might argue that it just made the internet more fun and engaging. I'm curious how you think about your time at BuzzFeed a couple of years on.
Yeah, I think, BuzzFeed at the time where it lived within internet culture really helped shape internet culture. When I started there, we were 10 people in a really small office trying to figure out, what the internet would become and how people would share content and what that actually looked like and meant. So I think, for us, it was how do we get people to resonate with what we're creating? How do we get people to share content? And what does that look like? And I think building the framework for what would live on the rails of a lot of these platforms and the content that would be created was done so in a way that really shaped a lot of the internet culture and a lot of pop culture and mainstream culture that started out as an experiment. So, I look on that fondly. I think as things evolve over time, things kind of the landscape changes and new social companies come up and things evolve in good or bad ways. I think once we kind of hit mainstream and we were working in tandem with a lot of these platforms, they were giving us a ton of organic reach, which was amazing. And then you kind of get to a point where they're not like supporting the company anymore, or the platform starts to kind of take the power back. And, that was always very interesting because it was kind of like the lifeblood. So there's a lot of lessons learned in kind of controlling your own destiny and not relying so heavily on secondary platforms to be the rails for the distribution. But in terms of the clickbait conversation, we really kind of shaped that time in that place of what that looked like and what content looked like then. And, as anything else, everything kind of evolves over time, whether it be good or bad. But I think from anything, there are good things and it'll, the company shaped, I think, a lot of the way that we create content and share content now.
Yeah, and I guess also, like, you were, if I'm not mistaken, one of the first media platforms that really innovated around this idea of native content and having brands actually, make content that wasn't just, press releases or blog posts. Were you the first?
I believe we were. I mean, when we started out, the big question was, how do we monetize the content that we're creating, and how do we monetize the site? And monetization was tricky. There were a couple of routes we could go, which was, put a bunch of banner ads on the site and make it kind of crapify it and make the user experience really terrible. And we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to take away from all the amazing things that we were creating on the editorial side. So we put our heads together and said, what is a product that we can create that we feel confident we can sell, that can really enhance people's experience, or at least make it tolerable, and that it can work. And we're not selling, just impressions or clicks. So we tried a lot of things. We tried affiliate products. We would try to sell beef jerky and buckyballs and all these weird things that, that was not a long-term solution. And then we thought about it. We said, how do we take a slice out of the advertising market, but do so in a way that's uniquely us? And the answer was, let's create content that's advertising, and let's create great content that is advertising, and let's do so in a way that the people that would consume our editorial content, they would consume the brand content just as much, because it's that good. So that's sort of how we started to evolve. But the industry certainly wasn't there. The agencies and client side didn't have content marketing or social marketing budgets at all, or brand marketing budgets. So we really needed to really educate the market on why content was a viable revenue stream and for us, and why it was a really great way of bringing people in to emotionally resonate with their brand.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, really, because, like you say, I mean, really this is just, or that was just content marketing, which is just 100% ubiquitous now. Every brand from, banks to pet food are doing content, and Buzzfeed was really a huge driver of that. So, Melissa, I read on your LinkedIn that you oversaw the strategy and creation of 3,000 branded campaigns, for Fortune 500 clients, driving almost 300 billion views. What are the biggest learnings and takeaways for brands across those campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, if you start with the why people would resonate with this and how does it connect back to your brand in an authentic way, I think you're going to have the most success. Forcing like memes or trying to do things that are just not like authentic don't typically work. We work with a ton of brands that were like, we just want to go viral. We want a meme, create a meme for us. And it's like, that's not how the internet culture works, right? So I think the brands that did the best were the ones that really let us like understand, they're coming to work with us because we understand the internet. We understand why people share. We understand different audiences. And when we were able to create that way with like that first, we'd always find success. So it was a bit of freedom and the ability to really, kind of go with the ideas first, rather than just kind of like forcing things.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, the sort of, can you plan for virality? I don't know if you remember during like the, NFT summer or whatever it was. I don't know if it was 2020 or 2021, but remember you had like Wendy's and Burger King sort of tweeting like GM at each other, and, forcing that whole sort of crypto thing. I mean, it's funny now. I mean, you look back and it is just so cringe. I mean, like, it's totally sort of not getting the internet culture, which I think is
you have people at the top that are just kind of like, this is how brands should interact, and it's just very off and it feels very forced. And I think it's kind of like what seems like an inside joke, like within a company or a brand, like is not probably the way that you want to advertise or speak to your audiences. And I always like to go back to that. Like even, here in everything we would do, it's kind of like, if we think this is funny because it's like an inside joke with us, like would someone on the outside like resonate with this? Because you often see a lot of commercials and you're like, what was that? Like, you're like, someone thought that was a good idea and then shopped it around to everyone else that would agree with that person. And that's how they came out with that. But they didn't really like kind of serve, like, humor is so subjective and resonance is so subjective that you really need to kind of get a wide array of people and say, like, is this actually funny? Like, and we do that all the time because it's hard for us to just say, like, all right, we're going to make these decisions based on like what our little group of people think is funny. So I think it's just kind of making sure that you're able to really understand that like humor is subjective and like that you should probably get some outside opinions and work with other people to understand, is it really funny, before you push it out.
Yeah, right. That's so interesting. And I think it's that old adage of, you shouldn't make advertising for advertising people. I guess it's a little bit of that same core idea is, really empathizing with customers. I want to move on to ClickUp, where you are now. And I guess what's interesting about you being at ClickUp is it's a enterprise, B2B software company, which, for someone who's done 3,000 campaigns at Buzzfeed, and then, you went on to do Cheddar after that, it does seem like a little bit of a left turn career-wise. Tell me sort of, how did you end up at ClickUp, and, what do you make of the difference between sort of B2B and B2C marketing?
Yeah. So I had been in media for the large part of my career. After Buzzfeed, I went to help start a company called Cheddar, which was also a media company. And the view there was that we could blend a differentiated approach to live programming with a very big trend that was happening in distribution and cord cutting, which was not a thing at the time. It was like, hey, this is starting to happen. And we did a lot of things differently. Our distribution was different. Our branding was different. It was very, I would say, progressive. It wasn't just like very dark and masculine. The anchors that we had on air were diverse, and we talked about a lot of range of topics that really touched a lot of, tech culture across things that young people would be interested in. So the rise of female founders, how do you get your first VC check? How do you raise money? And we would program it in a way that made it really relatable to young people interested in these topics versus kind of like a CNBC or Fox Business approach. So that was our approach there. And, after we sold that to a cable company, and coming out of that, I was like, I want to do that again and disrupt, but I do want to be on the software side. I think creating content where content is the product was something that I enjoyed doing for a very long time. But at that stage in my life, I wanted to try something different, where I was internal, in-house, building a differentiated brand, where the brand and the content wasn't the product, but we were able to differentiate and support an incredible product by creating awesome brand content, awesome commercials, really giving a very vibrant, colorful, innovative feel that could be humorous and approachable in a way that many other companies had never done, and become the gold standard for that. And that idea in an industry that I had never been in before felt like a real challenge, but the right challenge, and the right company and the right product could really allow me to do that very well. And that was, a lot that went into that decision.
Right. And I mean, because ClickUp is, of course, in a very competitive space.
Yes.
And so is the thesis that brand, of course, great product is table stakes, but is the thesis that, amazing brand is, one of the most powerful sort of ways to differentiate? And
yeah, I mean, in a hyper competitive space where technology is now like completely democratized, this is not like you can leapfrog for 10 years by building a product. It's like you have people that are coming up behind you every day, and they're building it in months. And like, I think that's a huge difference in where we are in that cycle of democratization of building that we never had before. So when I always believed that brand was a big lever and a big differentiator. But when you think about, an era in which anyone can build anything in a way, truncated amount of time, like brand plays an even bigger role because you have to stand out, especially if you're competing against, huge companies that have IPO'd and have, at that time hundreds of millions of dollars in funding and are much bigger than you. So, there are kind of those tried and true ways of doing that, which is punching up in a fun way to kind of position yourselves, next to them. And how can you get next to them? And I think that's always like how I thought about it from day one. It's like, how can we differentiate ourselves so much and punch up so much that we are just next to them? And that was a lot of like kind of how I thought about building the brand, and also just like how we wanted to come across in market. Like we were always okay with taking a humorous tone. We wanted people to laugh and watch our ads and say, that was great. I really enjoyed that. I would watch that again. And that's like that emotional resonance is the ability to then rent space in people's minds. So I always say that like if you walk away feeling something, you're going to remember that. And at that time when you're ready to make a decision, that's what's going to come back to you.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's an amazing insight, and something that, I spend a lot of time thinking about is that optimizing for sort of being memorable. Because I think, one thing, and I'll definitely put a link to, you've got a YouTube playlist on the YouTube channel where you've gathered all of your ads. And I mean, they're sort of, TV quality, I guess. They're really, really amazing and often humorous. I think what I find really interesting is that they do something that I don't see a lot of B2B brands doing, which is they're sort of, I don't know if it is the right way to put it, that you're sort of like personifying the pain points. You have one which is, the engineer's worst nightmare and things like that. And it's really sort of building these stories and these narratives about the customers, which, maybe it's becoming a little bit more common now, but it's definitely not something you've seen historically in B2B.
That's exactly it. Yeah, it's personifying that pain point or those pain points across those customer profiles that you're trying to reach. And it's like, what would resonate with an engineer? What are they dealing with? Like, what are the pain points? What are the frustrations? And we try to do that within everything that we do, whether it's focused on a specific target demo or it's more of a brand awareness. It's like, what are the frustrations within the workplace? And also talking about work culture and being able to kind of own that, like being able to really align with align the brand and the product with work, being synonymous with work is the ultimate goal.
Right. And I guess another brand that I think sticks out there, or at least did, was Slack. I think, they took a really, really fantastic approach to the brand. And it very much felt like, I don't know, they were one of you, or I don't know exactly how to put it, but it was like this very relatable piece of your workday, which is really good. Did you guys run a SuperBowl commercial this year? Not
this year. We did that last year.
Yeah. Tell me about that. I mean, because, I assume that's a humongous investment.
It is.
Tell me a little bit about the experience with that. I mean, what went into the decision to do it? Would love to learn a little bit more about the sort of the creative process and I guess reflections afterward.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we always had, cared a lot about brand awareness in general. So brand was a big part of our strategy. For the year prior to running the SuperBowl ad, we had invested heavily in our out-of-home strategy that spanned across all of pretty much the key cities where knowledge workers lived. And we had, units on billboards and buses and in airports. So when we decided to do the SuperBowl commercial, which is still kind of like the ultimate way to reach mass markets in the US. Like it just is. It's kind of the event of the year. So when you think about those eyeballs, and we're like, hey, if we're able to do a great ad, if we're confident we can create something amazing, and we can do it for a good price in-house, and we can take the strategy that we've employed over the past year with hitting those key cities, and not by a national ad, but by a geo-targeted ad towards those same markets, this would make sense for us. So it was pretty strategic. It wasn't just like, let's throw, X amount at this ad. It was like, hey, let's double down on the strategy that we've built that has worked for the past year. And let's put, more fuel to the fire behind that. And that's sort of how we made the decision. And then, we did a lot of work internally, very quick timeline, but we have an amazing team here, and we did the whole thing in house. So, the cost of the actual production was minimal, compared to anyone that would be working with an outside agency. So we were able to save a lot there. And then, we made a strategic investment in deciding to run that ad.
I'm curious as to how you think about, I guess, the channel mix. I guess in B2B specifically, there's a little bit of, I don't know if it's a consensus or not, but, there is definitely a feeling that, these radio, TV, out of home, they're sort of, hard to measure, hard to quantify. Yep. They're dying. No one's watching TV anyway. Tell me, what's your take on, I guess, the sort of the non-traditional, the traditional channels and what role they play for brands and how to think about them?
I think the channel mix is always evolving, and you just have to kind of stay on the cusp of where it is and where people are watching. And while people may not be watching, broadcast television in the demo that you want, they certainly are watching the Super Bowl. So that was strategic, but they are cutting the cord and watching streaming services. So when you think about OTT, that's become a huge part of our mix. The ads are not skippable. You're able to target them. You're able to understand what's working and what's not working and scale them accordingly. Unlike television, where it's a linear buy and it's just impressions delivered. So, technology and advertising for television and streaming television has evolved quite significantly. So that's a great way to kind of, a great pivot, I believe, in the way that like advertising has evolved. And then, podcasts as well, like, audio is such a huge part of people's daily lives and routines now that you have to be in audio in some capacity. And then, the tried and true YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. And I think it's kind of that evolution of like, hey, when new channels present themselves, like, you should test them out and see if they work. I think having this like standardized mix where you're not evolving your media mix constantly and your channel mix constantly, you're going to get left behind.
And I think, the other thing is we were doing some research into radio recently, working with some clients. And I do think, though, that people drastically underestimate how big these, sort of traditional mediums still are. I mean, the percentage of Americans that listen to the radio in the car every day, it's mind-boggling. So I think it's worth keeping that in mind. Melissa, I want to move on to the topic on everyone's mind and lips, which is AI. Okay. You've made some fantastic and quite humorous videos about AI and what it means for, the workplace. I'm curious, how are you thinking about AI and the tool set that's sort of evolving, for a marketer and for a creative team? What role are these things going to play?
Yeah, I mean, AI is the first thing or the first real tech that feels so tangible from day one. Anyone can access GPT and can feed it the right prompts and can summarize documents and can spit out really amazing things. And I believe human touch needs to be involved in that process as well. I think it's working with AI, not letting AI just completely dictate what it's creating. But it's amazing how quickly and how much smarter it gets every single day. So I think AI is going to play a huge role in the workplace. I think it will probably replace a lot of the mundane tasks that we don't want to be doing, or the things that like take up the bandwidth and the brain space that shouldn't be, to allow us to focus on the things that we can actually really do well. Or, sometimes AI can almost act like a brainstorming buddy. I'll feed it some ideas and it'll feed me back ideas, and then I'll feed it more ideas. And it's like going back and forth with someone, which is great. It's great for the creative process. We can think about different prompts that we want for creating content, and we can feed it to AI and kind of just work with it that way. But I've seen such an amazing use case and potential for it so far. Everyone has opinions on it, which is also great and makes for great content as well. But I think in terms of the ability to just really streamline and automate certain pieces of work in a really effective and smart way, AI is just like an amazing tool for that. And I'm really excited to see how it evolves. I think there's just unlimited potential for the way that it can really impact work as we know it.
Yeah, no, I think I really concur with that. I think, of course, I think there is an argument to say it might sort of, I don't know, lead to the proliferation of more average content, which, like, look, it probably will. And I think in some way it reminds me a little bit of the early days of SEO, which I was sort of in at the time.
I think that's a great point. I think that also that's good for us, because I think what that will force us to do is be even more thoughtful about what we're putting out there. And the mediocre content won't win anymore. It will have to really be kind of that next wave of everything. So I think when you think about that, maybe it's good. Maybe there's just too much mediocre content as there is currently, and this will just kind of put into hyperspeed that to be able to stand out, you got to create things that are differentiated.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. And I think that's a lot of how we are talking about it internally is, we actually think that we might be on the cusp of like a, renaissance of brand and creative, because, right, there's sort of the competition at the average level is just going to become, unwinnable.
Absolutely.
With 500 character, crappy SEO keyword stuffed blog posts. That's it's almost like a dead product now. It
was kind of almost dead already. And now, I think that, that's a really good point. And people should certainly be thinking about that. Marketers should certainly be thinking about that and what that means for them.
Yeah. So I'd like to finish with a quick fire round. So quick answers as they come to you. So the first one, so what are you loving right now? What's got your attention? It might be a brand, a book, a hobby,
I'm loving the evolution of what we're working on, which are kind of like this creating short skits that also play into the brand that we're building and the product that we support, but in a way that doesn't feel over the top. And I think if we can create hundreds of mini ads or mini commercials every day that are content and that are great, I think that we can break boundaries on what B2B marketing is. So I'm very excited about the strategy that we've been working on. We've been publishing, 2 to 3 videos every week, and they're commentary on the state of work. They're commentary on AI and things happening in tech. They're fun ways of showcasing our product. So I think that there's just a lot there, and I love the ability to kind of newsjack and touch on pop culture, but still tie it back to brands. So that's what I'm really excited about, is kind of the evolution of what we've been working on. So we've been hyper focused on that. A book I read recently was I believe it's called The Surrender Experiment, which was really just kind of eye-opening in the way that the world works and things happen, and sometimes reminding yourself to kind of surrender to certain aspects of life as they come, and control the things that you can control, but kind of surrender to the things that you can't. And I guess those are the two things that reading and focusing on building this machine.
Love that. Just I'm breaking my own rule of I'm not meant to answer in the short fire. But how many people are in the creative team? Because you said 2 to 3 skits a week. I'm curious to what's the team look like? How many people?
Yeah, so the team is made up of a few folks on the video side, motion graphics, design, and collectively, I believe we're around 15.
It's amazing what you can get done with a small team.
Yeah, we just, it's not that it's not a grind. We're shooting 3 to 4 times a week. Also, we're, shooting, branded campaigns for the company as we roll out, the next iteration of our product. We're working on OTT commercials. So there's a lot, there's design, there's motion graphics stuff. So there's a lot going on always. But it really is, we're a small but mighty team, and we move fast, and we're able to really kind of pump things out quickly that hopefully resonate.
Love that. So tell me your favorite marketing campaign of all time and why.
That is a tricky one. First of all, I don't know if I have a favorite of all time. I think I'm really loving, and I think we're kind of trying to emulate this on a B2B approach, but I'm really loving the content that Liquid Death is putting out consistently. I think they just know their brand. They can make fun of themselves. It's just really funny. And they just take creative liberties that I'm a huge fan of. I think they do a fantastic job. I was always inspired by the Mac versus PC ads. I thought that those were kind of groundbreaking and super polarizing, and they created a lot of commotion, which is something that we emulated with an ad series we did against Jira last year, where we took that similar approach, and it kind of got the same reception. So, I think we draw a lot of inspiration from other historical campaigns or historical ads. and also just formats of things that have worked before, and then applying those frameworks to what we're doing. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great advertising across the history of advertising, and going back from VW's Lemon to, you know, a lot of the kind of Apple, of course, you know, their advertising is always incredible. And I think that there's just like, you can draw inspiration from many different places, and I try to do that across the spectrum of everything.
It's funny, you're the second person in a row to mention Mac vs PC as their, you know, so that campaign has, I mean, and look, I must, you know, I agree, it's absolutely fantastic. Did you see that Justin Long actually switched? Like, they did a new one, and he's on the PC side now. Which,
really? I haven't seen that.
I don't know how I feel about that.
They brought it back? Wow. That's great. That's great.
Yeah,
I'll have to check.
But yeah, there's something about, you know, being bought, I guess, by the other side. What do you think is the best brand in the world right now, or who is the best brand in the world right now, if not Liquid Death, maybe, or, you know?
Best brand in the world right now. I mean, it's really hard to compete with Apple. Like, I think their brand marketing is just like spectacular. I think Liquid Death is a front runner for how they do brand and how fast they've built. But just the emotion and what Apple can pack into, 30 seconds of content from their user conference, you know, they just are spectacular in execution. Obviously it's a huge company, so there's a lot, you know, at that level that you can do, and tons of agencies that they're working with. But yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to beat Apple just in general, but I think there's a lot of inspiration you can draw from them. But on the kind of B2C, you know, up and coming side, I think, you know, Liquid Death kind of takes the reign.
Yeah, no, I think those are two great ones. What do you think is the most overrated trend in marketing right now?
Overrated trend. Overrated trend in marketing. That's a good question. Perhaps just like producing for producing's sake, like I guess like just creating to create rather than like thinking about what you're doing and why. I don't know. Sometimes I see content and I'm just like, why would anyone resonate with that? And I think like the thought that needs to go into every single piece of content that you create, whether it's a commercial or a social post, should really kind of have that thought process in it. So I don't know if it's an overrated trend, but I think that, put the human touch and humanize marketing again.
Yeah, I think especially on the B2B side, I think, you know, the amount of, I think we already mentioned the 500 character keyword blog post.
Yeah, and it's also just like feature parity and your ability to differentiate based on like just features alone and product alone. I think we maybe have mentioned this, but democratization of tech is just so prevalent now. Like, people can build something that would have taken them years in a couple of months. And I think it's really important to remember that, and that brand is a huge differentiator. So if building brand is just as important as building, great product.
Great. Last one. So what's the tactic no one is talking about that everyone should be talking about? I guess maybe it could be framed as the next big thing in marketing.
I think it's kind of this approach of just like creating a lot of really great content and not doing one giant campaign. A lot of brands I see, like, this actually might be the most overrated trend in marketing, which is utilizing Ryan Reynolds. Honestly, I feel like he's just like this default now of like, we created a commercial with Ryan Reynolds. And I think that, you spend a lot of money doing that. You create one ad and it's like this one blast, right? And then it's over. And I think consistency and not having to lean on a celebrity is going to be the next wave of what's going to happen. Rather than like a large campaign moment, I think will become consistent streams of content, and how we think about advertising will be more like just consistency in delivery and actual distribution rather than like creating one large thing. that everyone is relying on to like get the message across and sell a ton of product. I don't really believe in that strategy anymore. People's attention spans move so quickly that you kind of constantly have to be top of mind. And how do you do that if you've created one campaign? I think it's multiple mini campaigns across, tons of output. That's sort of the way that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a discussion for another podcast, I think. But I think there is a really interesting discussion to be had around celebrities and how that plays out in the future. I think, obviously, sort of the deepfake AI, what if the cost of endorsements, goes to zero? What does that do? But again, going back to System 1, I was reading a report after the Super Bowl where they showed that it was something about, I can't remember what the metric was, but it was like they could really see that sort of, brand characters and mascots, way outperform celebrities in terms of recall and memorability. So I think, that's just such an interesting insight.
Yeah. And celebrities aren't, they're not just your brand spokespeople,
Right.
they're being traded in and out every day. So how do you create something that you can own?
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a great time.
Thanks for listening to the Own the Moment podcast. If you liked this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss upcoming episodes. And to suggest a guest or provide feedback, please visit our dedicated podcast hub at ownthemomentpod.com.